you didn't know if, like, within a few hours, it's just like you're waiting at your door. Are you one of the lucky ones that aren't going to get hit and get deported?
And it just emotionally it was really bad because I fled another country so that I could enjoy I guess the benefit of a more free press. And for my reporting or my presence at any protest being a deciding factor on whether or not I will have a degree that I've worked away at.
Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Flint, Michigan, East Palestine, Ohio, Tumwa, Iowa. Please support the only independent outlet on the ground covering what the corporate media covers up.
Hey, it's Jordan. I am delighted, but also alarmed to be joined by this fella. I am, out of abundance of caution, going to keep him anonymous for his own protection. But joining us now, we'll just say John Doe is a student at Michigan State University. Ironically, if full disclosure, about 2 weeks ago, he was one of the candidates I spoke to for a possible reporter job at Status Coup. And now you are 2 weeks later, kind of just on eggshells, like so many other students across the country, because students on visas, students who are here from other countries, are basically getting letters from their universities that they are being or attempted to be deported. In this case, you learned. Well, first tell me, how did you learn that students at Michigan State University were foreign students, I should say, were going to be subject to deportation?
Yeah. First, thank you for having me. And, also, the way I found out was an email through the Office of International Students. And it was from the director of that department, and the first paragraph, the whole letter was pretty vague. It was just basically, you may be hearing reports of students having their C-vis documents or F-1 visas revoked, which I'll explain a little bit later. And they said that they're closely monitoring the situation. And what I found confusing was that every other school has kind of disclosed how many students had been deported. So that's kind of how, in the news would kind of report, okay, 80 students out of ASU, for example.
Let me show the audience. Obviously your name was at the top, but just for the purposes of protecting your identity, which is very alarming that we have to, in America 2025, basically keep students here legally on a student visa, have to kind of blur their identity so that the Trump Gestapo doesn't come after them. You may be hearing reports of international students across the U.S. having the F-1 visa stamp in their passport revoked and their C-vis record terminated. In addition, there are reports of non-immigrants being questioned about content on their electronic devices when entering the U.S. from abroad. OISS, I guess that's the Office of Student Services.
Office of International Student Services, I believe.
Closely monitoring the situation for Michigan State University students and consulting with colleagues and immigration attorneys to learn more. I am also in regular contact with university leadership about these issues. OISS has updated our immigration alerts webpage with more information on the two issues mentioned above. I encourage you to carefully review the page, blah, 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 blah. Kind of sounds to me, they don't.
It was a nothing burger. I was in shock. I turned to my girlfriend, who I live with, and I was like, "Did you get the email?" She was like, "What email?" I was like, "Oh, shit, you're not an international student." And I showed it to her and she started panicking. My phone started blowing up because I have international sources from the school and international friends from the school as well who were also panicking. So it just kind of set off these alarm bells all at once.
And I should say, if it wasn't clear, I mentioned you had interviewed for our job, but you have done journalism previously. You're still actively doing journalism as a student. You're seeking to do journalism in the future in America, and where you're from originally, not exactly allowed.
Yeah. So when we found out, and then the next day, we kind of found out that letter came to us around 4:45. So that was 15 minutes before the office closed. And I've reached out to the school to ask some questions about how many and whether or not the school can guarantee that if, let's say, an international student is deported, they can finish their degree online. Because one thing a lot of people, people have like an idea of what international students are, or some people think they're very well off because they're paying more than out-of-state students. But a lot of us, me included, are under scholarships, and it's the idea that you can be whisked away and for your 4 years to go down the drain. I mean, it's a type of annihilation. I can't even put into words.
And, obviously we're trying to protect your identity, but did you have any idea, because this was across the board at Michigan State. I mean, I'll show this headline: international students' visas have been revoked, Michigan State University says. Did you have any idea, like, how many? Did you have any idea, were these specifically students who had, according to Marco Rubio, created ruckus, i.e. protested against the Gaza genocide?
Well, that's the ironic thing. The pro-Palestinian groups that I'm in contact with, they tell me that nobody in their ranks, or even the ones arrested, I don't think any of them were international students, but nobody who was in that group, who was international, was deported. So I guess it's one of those things where it feels almost arbitrary. If they were doing, "Oh, we were rounding up protesters." It would be consistent. I don't support that, obviously. But the idea that, like the people who are being deported, criminality, an element of criminality is being associated with that is really wrong and inaccurate.
Right.
MSU's the only school that didn't disclose how many students were deported.
So that's important to note, that other universities did tell their students how many had been deported.
Yep, that's correct.
So let me ask you, because I myself don't know much about the process. It's not an easy process to come here and get a student visa.
No, it's bad.
I assume it's not cheap either. So could you talk about, like, how long went into this process to get a student visa? Was it costly? I mean, it sounds like you get an email at 4:45, and I mean, you and I were talking separately. You don't know if, like, someone's coming to your door at midnight. You're on pins and needles because you could be deported within a few hours.
Yeah. And that's one thing to note, and thank you for bringing that up, which is that when they terminate your right to remain, which is your CVIS form, you're supposed to immediately leave the country, or else, that can be enforced. So, I started school during the Biden administration when there was still COVID raging, and it is still happening, but at a rate that was much higher at the time. And it was a nightmare to get an appointment. It's worse off for many other countries, but the country where I was from that I was actually fleeing because of my investigations into their police force. It was a nightmare to get an appointment. And you're supposed to fill out this questionnaire, which is kind of insane. They ask you if you are a terrorist or if you've ever participated in genocide. Which is really ironic because, the immigration officials are pretty partial towards Israeli folks who come and go.
So to be clear, in the forms you fill out to try and get a student visa, you're asked if you've ever communicated or supported or been involved with a terrorist group?
No, if you are in a terrorist group, they're more specific, and it's insane. Like, even if you were, would you say yes? I mean, again, it's silly. But when we get that stamp, the F-1 visa, and it says, non-immigrant alien, that's the label they give you when you first come here. And, I remember I flew in, including layovers, 26 hours to get to this place. And there's obviously shambolic public transport at Michigan because it's a car state. So, I had to make arrangements. I remember at one point international students like me, we would spend a lot of holidays alone. We wouldn't have much money either. And it's a difficult time when you're here. It's very isolating. Especially in Michigan, where people go to the school and their hometowns are nearby. And you notice that East Lansing becomes a seasonal town, because most of the population here are college students. So I hope that gives you some idea.
And just like, I'm not trying to get the waterworks here, but I mean, tell me about, like, your emotions and your psychology, because you and I were communicating, but, like, you're you're close to graduation, yet you didn't know if, like, within a few hours, it's just like you're waiting at your door. Are you one of the lucky ones that aren't going to get hit and get deported? Or if you are, do you even know where they were going to send you?
Yeah. No, I remember when I got that, I panicked because I was like, okay, I need to get my stuff in order, like all my papers. And it just emotionally it was really bad because I fled another country so that I could enjoy I guess the benefit of a more free press. I'm not saying America has a free press necessarily, but one that had a greater degree of autonomy. And for my reporting or my presence at any protest being a deciding factor on whether or not I will have a degree that I've worked away at. I mean, I've had a full college experience just 2 years ago. We had a mass shooting here that I reported on. All right. And I feel like after, it's just ridiculous. I mean, I feel like I have gone through a lot of traumatic events in this country. And I've had a lot of good times in this country. And with all this time, you kind of set down your roots, but that's the other thing. The immigration office asks you if you want to remain in the U.S. after you graduate. And if you say yes, your application for this visa is denied. So almost as if it feels that this is all fatalistic, that it's inevitable, that you are not going to be here.
If you say you want to stay here after your application for which specific visa is denied?
That's the F1 visa. The student visa, one of the most common ones among international students. And one of the things they ask you, they're able to ask you and they ask you on the form is like whether or not you plan on staying in the US to work after you graduate, even though there are like processes for that, but they mean beyond the 1 year or 3 years you're given, depending on your degree. So in a way, they're kind of preemptively telling you, you can't go into this wanting to be an American resident or, any encouraging any sort of path to citizenship.
And without giving too many details, because we're trying to protect your identity, but where you're from originally, you cannot really practice real journalism. And if you were deported here, I mean, that kind of makes you a stateless person if you want to continue practicing journalism, because you can't do it where you're from and you can't be here, according to the Trump administration.
Yeah, I think that's the depressing part, is that I'd have to go back to bartending, probably. But, I think that's the other thing. I always thought when I first moved here, I thought that, okay, at the very least, they won't deport you based on your coverage or what you choose to attend. I thought that was like a very clear red line. Maybe that was naive of me. But it just seems to me now that they've really crossed the line there, and that's worrying to me because that line has been crossed, in the places that I'm from. So, yeah.
Do you feel that, I mean, obviously you're at Michigan State, do you feel that Michigan State, but broader than that, because this is happening across the country, many different universities, do you feel like colleges are doing enough? I mean, elephant in the room, a lot of these colleges get money for the federal government, which is insane because they were already getting a ton of money from wealthy people. But I mean, that email they sent you was pretty mealy-mouthed. I don't see the president of Michigan State University going in front of the camera speaking out against this. I certainly don't see Columbia's president, Harvard, others. I mean, they've already folded to Trump. Do you feel like academia in general is doing enough? Because technically universities are supposed to be, breeding grounds for free speech and thought, but they don't seem to be speaking up against an authoritarian crackdown on free speech.
Yeah. I think typically we associate civil rights with, university students. But I think by and large, the university structure has always been a factory for the right wing and authoritarianism. I also think that when we look at university hierarchies, you have probably 12 people calculating the cost of benefit for whether or not the president should step in front of the camera. The truth is, they're powerless to really do anything that the State Department decides because they're revoking these visas very quietly and letting the school discover it. Now, the question I have really is I need schools to guarantee that if they arrest a student with their own police force, if they will be passing that info on to ICE. I want guarantees that we can finish our degree abroad if we're illegally deported. I want guarantees that if, ICE turns up on campus, they'll be turned away. You see that? That's the thing that matters. I think if the president were to go in front of the camera and say that he opposes this, it makes no difference whether or not I need to pack my bags.
Right. And, you kind of touched upon it, but I wonder from the perspective of, not just international students, just anyone who wants to come here. Right now they're doing it to students, but it wasn't just students out at these pro-Palestinian protests. Are you kind of now like, oh, maybe I was wrong? Because the idea is, hey, you're going to flee these authoritarian countries, wherever it is. A lot of those countries, America has helped topple democratically elected leaders. But the idea is, well, if we make it to America, the dream and freedom of speech and freedom of the press. But now with this all going on, do you kind of feel like you're in this nightmare of you came here based on an ideal and now that's being potentially pulled out from under you?
I think I never really bought into the American dream. I think for me, I came here because I saw Michigan as a place that was not covered in a way that I saw to be good, at all. I saw it as like a very undercovered state, to be honest, as a journalist.
Why do you think I went to Flint 21 times?
And Flint was a huge thing for me. Where I'm from, water and military security are tied together through, and when I started reading about what was happening to Flint, it was to me that was a genocide. And when I saw about, how it was being covered, I knew that was where I wanted to go because there were journalists who chose not to do it. And where I'm from, if you choose to go and investigate it, you'll get arrested or whatever. And I moved here because I knew that I wouldn't get arrested for what I wrote. But you're right. I think the gloves are off. This is something that I think Biden paved the way for. And Trump is now kind of taking advantage of and adding a lot of his own flourishes to it.
Right. And, I'd like to ask you as a journalist, you've dodged the bullet now, so to speak. You haven't been deported, but right now it's about the pro-Palestinian protests. But, Trump's going to be president for another 3 years based on how he's talking, maybe forever. I don't know if the Constitution.
He's having a physical soon, isn't he?
Yeah, he's having a physical soon. But you would have to think, if I was in your shoes, might be hesitant about anything I cover that's anti-capitalism. If I was a foreign student, or if you got beyond a student, a visa to extend your stay here, a work visa, because what if there's another Standing Rock or a big, environmental protest, which the government has now tried to call protesters and independent journalists eco-terrorists. So isn't it kind of, you could stay here, but everybody would want to be a tough guy and say, whatever, I don't care. But it has to be in your mind that if you continue to cover certain things that the Trump administration, the right wing, Emperor Musk doesn't like, that they could then group you in, you're helping incite riots.
Well, for me, I have to just live my life. I would go crazy if I thought about that all the time. I think I can't capitulate specifically because a lot of my reporting in the past year, especially along the Harris campaign trail and from the DNC and one of our last stops in Lansing, is I saw this pattern of just capitulation no matter where I went. It's making excuses. If the other side never goes for half measures, I don't think I should be any different. I think I should, I have to, I think it's necessary. It's easy to say that you'll stand for your ideals when nothing's really affecting you. So I think especially now, I'm going to be going to more protests. I'm going to be covering more things that I previously thought were risky. Not because I have a death wish, but it seems to me that if they're arbitrarily just picking people off the street, I might as well put all my energy into reporting what I find important. And right now, it's how the working class and the Palestinians are getting fucked over.
Well, I will just say from my perspective, and unfortunately for the audience, they can't fully see your face or your normal voice because we're blurring it and distorting it to protect you. But I'll say from my perspective, in addition to the disgusting morality of it, because this is depraved, what they're doing, I think what this highlights is they're also removing people from the country that could really be of value to the country. Because as I told you, showing the audience the behind the scenes, you were the runner up. It was between you and who I eventually ended up hiring. And, if I had the money, I would have hired you too. I just only had enough for one reporter, but I think you're extremely talented. I was really impressed because for your age, a student, you're far advanced than a lot of other reporters, and your maturity, things you've broken. And it's just a shame that whether it's a reporter or, a student who could be a doctor or a student who could be whatever it is, civil rights, they're removing people arbitrarily based that could be real assets to the country, not just more stooges on Wall Street, but in journalism and medicine and research, etc., all basically to drum up a base that they've convinced you're to blame.
Yeah. I see a lot of the headlines, too. And I think the way you see a lot of the headlines on, say, the mainstream media like Wall Street Journal, they'll be like, oh, the agriculture industries are going to crash if immigrants aren't here or whatever. But it's like at this point, do you really need people to pick your strawberries for you to care? It's just, to me, it's ridiculous, because everybody who comes here, and I have all my international school friends, they work hard. They work harder than so many people who can go to college for 5 or 6 years if they don't pass, their classes. But if you don't pass your classes as an international student, you're deported. So there's always this threat of you being uprooted. And thank you for acknowledging that this will lead to a brain drain. And I've seen this happen in other countries. It will happen. And the America will truly understand what a free market means at that point.
And my last question, because, for a long time, I didn't use the F word with Trump. I didn't call him a fascist because I think that a lot of times just politicians we don't like fascist. I think it's appropriate now based on what I'm seeing. But as somebody who has come from other countries where there has been authoritarianism, there's been, dare I say, fascism, based on what you experienced growing up, again, not disclosing where you're from, do you see that's where America is going based on the first almost 80 days of this administration?
Yes, but I've been seeing the slow walk ever since. The one thing is that it's not just Trump. Right? Like when I first read about politics in the US and I was maybe 12 or 13, and seeing how all the footage out of WikiLeaks and stuff like that, it became really clear that they have no interest in protecting anybody. And when Trump, and because we have this return to strongman politics, I guess it is easy to say that Trump is the head fascist, but of course, this has been paved through multiple political generations. But to answer your question, it is the most obvious here, as there's ever been I've ever seen or read. It's almost yeah. It reminds me of when my dad was growing up in India, when Indira Gandhi declared a national emergency and ruled through executive order, and they also had a constitutional crisis. And it's a disaster. I see that. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, I'm sorry for what you're going through. I'm happy that, for whatever reason, you were not deported. Yeah, it's scary times. I think it's important. We know just from human psychology, particularly in America, a lot of people, if it doesn't affect them, oh well. You saw a lot of these Trump people that were fired, that were government workers. All of a sudden, they were turning against Trump. They were okay if other people were affected, immigrants, etc. Came home to them. Now, all of a sudden, they're anti-Trump. And I think we might need to start realizing we can't just wait till it affects us. We are in it together, whether you're born here, not born here, because neoliberalism and capitalism is an international cancer, in my view.
Absolutely. They're just starting with us. This is a test run the same way America does test runs on foreign nations. They want to influence or harm. They're going to do it right back to the domestic population.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. I hope one day we could have you back, the real you, and not have to, protect your identity. And we'll stay in touch.
All right, absolutely. Thank you.